correctly. Okay, good. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our January LTPT meeting. It'll be a pretty quick one today, not too much on the agenda starting with the new year. But thank you again for joining us. And also, like y'all know, these meetings are recorded. If you have to leave or if you just miss something on the meeting, these are posted on the Florida Commerce YouTube page, usually a day or two after we're done with the meeting. So let's jump right into it. We have an announcement about the Digital Competitive Award Grant that was through the NTIA. We want to say congratulations to Pine Ellis County. They received a 6.9 million grant from this Digital Competitive Grant for the city of St. Petersburg. We looked at the application and it was, really great. I thank you, Beatrice, for sharing that with us as well. I thought it was a great application. Y'all are going to do some great things in the city, so we're really excited to see that. And again, our office is here for, any support or guidance. But I know, Beatrice, you're on the call, so, congratulations on getting that grant. I think that's really great. I know yesterday I got an email from another LTPT knowing if or asking if we got any um, got any updates on if any other counties in Florida were awarded anything from this grant, and we're not. From our side of things, we do not know if anybody else in Florida has been awarded, but after talking with Jacob, it does seem like all of the money that was appropriated for this grant was not dispersed. So there is a possibility that there may be more rounds of funding to go out, but since we did not administer this grant, we don't know. That's kind of hard to tell. But there is still the possibility that for other counties that did apply for the digital competitive grant, you may still have the possibility to be awarded, but that may take some time. But other than that, congrats again to Pine Ellis. That's really exciting. So,
Aaron,
oh
they,
yes.
they awarded 250 million out of the 750 million. So there's 500 million available in this round, which many folks think will be announced in the next 30 days.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Peter,
You're
for
welcome.
mentioning that. So yeah, what Peter said. So there's that possibility to still be awarded. So now the next thing to cover. So our director of the office, Leo Garcia, brought to Jacobs and I attention that there is still some certain funds regarding Hurricane Ian, which was, I guess, a few years ago. That was way before I joined the office. But he wanted to share that information with y'all just because since you guys are the LTPTs, you're our local connection to local county government organizations. We thought this was really valuable information that you can bring back to your local communities and make sure that they know that these funds are available if they're still, struggling from the impacts of Hurricane Ian. So I will share that. It's regarding the housing repair and replacement program. There are certain steps to recovery. It's about a 40-page document, so not too long. I looked through it pretty quickly. I'm not going to go through the whole thing just because this doesn't apply to all LTPTs. It's just, I think, maybe 10 counties that may apply for it. But it gives really great information. So I'll share this toolkit with the LTPTs that it applies to specifically. There is a letter that comes with it and also kind of graphics that you would be able to share with your local county government that you can, post on all social media. So your Facebook, Instagrams, Twitters, or, just get it out in the local community. Um, yeah, Leo has his hand raised.
Thanks, Aaron. And guys, just to supplement what Aaron shared, as well as the information that she'll mail out to you. Again, what we're trying to do is get more traffic for the program and getting the word out of what's available for continued assistance for those impacted by Hurricane Ian. If you're not familiar with the Office of Long-Term Resiliency, I am putting in the chat the website for you to visit, in addition to the specific link that takes you to the Hurricane Ian page. which provides a little more detail, which is inclusive of the toolkit that Aaron just mentioned and we'll share with you directly. Again, what we're trying to do is get the word out for folks that have been impacted by Hurricane Ian, whether it be the housing repair and replacement program, as well as other efforts that we have within the Hurricane Ian funding outside of that direct housing aspect. So there will be some dollars committed to infrastructure build outs for communities and or municipalities that are interested. So one of the things that does coincide with these dollars is that there was some direct allocations given to what we call entitlement counties. Specifically, those were Lee, Sarasota, Orange, and Volusia. And those dollars were directly shared or given from the federal government to those counties, as you can see on the very bottom of the page there, Aaron is showing. So those counties there received their direct allocation. So those are dollars that the state cannot use to help fund any of the programs that those counties are going to run. The remaining counties that were impacted by Hurricane Ian is what the state of Florida can assist with in getting those recovery efforts going, as well as having them completed. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and or I can put you in contact with the team in the Office of Long-Term Resiliency to provide you some more direction. But I felt like this toolkit that Aaron will share with you can be a somewhat of a resource to you and the folks that are impacted in your area. So I'm open to any questions that we may have now, or you can feel free to email me at your leisure.
Beatrice, I saw that your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. I noticed that Pinellas is colored in, but it's not on the list.
Um, that is a great question. Leo, would you know the answer to that by any
What do you
chance?
mean by that list of the centers right there? Is that
Uh,
what you're referencing, Miss?
Well, the map has some of the counties colored in, so but Pinellas isn't listed. So Pinellas is colored in on this map, but it's not listed.
Well, Pinellas is a county that is receiving state dollars or is eligible to receive state dollars. So while they're not listed on this list that you see here, it's just because this reference sheet of the Charlotte County, DeSoto, and Hillsborough, to name the few that are listed on this list, is that we have actual centers for
Okay.
constituents to go into their building and inquire and or apply for being considered for some of the benefits. That doesn't mean that Pinellas is not receiving the opportunity to be a participant in the program, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Thank you. I mean, I don't want to share it with it, and then people they're like, we don't.
No, no, it's just this one page here that's on screen. It's just showing where we have actual physical buildings and centers for constituents to walk into if they wanted to apply in that fashion. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to do it in that way.
Okay.
So
Thank you
on
so
our
much.
website, there's a Hurricane Ian website
Uh-huh.
that you can definitely get more information and share those details directly through there. But our vendor that's overseeing those efforts has set up various platforms for individuals to inquire and or apply.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, thank you, Leo, for answering that. So, after the meeting, I will kind of add up all of the counties that qualify for this funding and then send out this toolkit and information to y'all, since it doesn't obviously apply to everybody. But like Leo said, these are the center locations that are in the state, so it is 7 of them. I will definitely send the toolkits to these 7 LTPTs, but then also the additional counties I'll make sure to get y'all included as well. um Trying to think what else. But yeah, it's a great toolkit. I don't want to go through the whole thing just because it's a lot of additional information and this doesn't apply to everybody. But again, this toolkit provides a lot of great information and it explains the program. And again, the other information I'll be sending you all is a letter that you can, provide to constituents, as well as some digital images that you can, post on your social medias for instance. So does anyone have any additional questions regarding that?
We have a timeline that this has to be filed by. I know that Ian was back in what, 2022?
Yes, so great question. As we don't have it yet publicized, but I can share with you that the anticipated date that is floating around now for closeout of receiving applications is the end of March. So we do have some time frame, there to kind of get the word out and getting folks, applying. So that will soon be probably made public here in the short order, in the next couple days and or next week.
Thank you, Leo.
Of course.
Okay, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. So I will throw it over to Jacob to provide workforce development grant application updates.
Thanks, Aaron. So just wanted to give some quick updates on the workforce development side of things. We are still sort of finalizing everything, but we are, I think drawing some conclusions about the best way to move forward with our BEAD workforce stuff. As we've talked about, it's $110 million in total funding from our allocation. So Florida is one of the premier leaders in workforce on this, so we're super excited about it. The way that we are approaching it at the moment is we're going to be working through the CareerSource network to, to fund our apprenticeships and those efforts. So the idea is we would do a direct grant through CareerSource to fund apprenticeships, and then if you have state and technical colleges that have a apprenticeship program and they need additional funds or support or whatever, that they would work through the CareerSource network in their area. And then we would have a separate fund for sort of an open competitive application to educational institutions or other institutions that can provide services that are relevant. So the types of things that we're looking at funding through the competitive application are wraparound services like transportation, childcare, et cetera, training equipment, instructor recruitment. You can fund tuition as well, and other sort of similar types of things. But that's sort of the idea that we have for now. Like I said, handle apprenticeships through CareerSource and then get the other sort of elements funded through a competitive application so that depending on the specific needs of the area, they can be addressed that way. So like I said, we're working through the specifics of that. We should have a webinar ready for you with more information about the application pretty soon, but that's what's coming next. We've got our challenge process data submitted to NTIA. So once we get that back, we get that cured, and we move forward with that, then we can get our list of locations finalized and then draw project areas and move forward with the deployment, probably late summer, early fall. And we're looking to have the workforce obviously trained up and ready to go before that happens. So that's sort of the timing situation. Things are going well. They're going smoothly. Obviously, there's a big transition in Washington happening, but we don't anticipate that being too much of a stumbling block for us. So things are going well on our end with the workforce development. We're excited about it. Happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Jacob, Axel Clawberg, Hillsborough County. That update you just provided as part of the workforce development grant, was that on BEAD, the timeline you just talked about?
Yes, sir. The workforce development is BEAD on deployment.
Okay. Any other general update on BEAD that you all can share?
So, like I said, what we're mainly doing right now is working with the NTIA to finalize our list of locations. So we we've completed our challenge process that was submitted before the holidays. We submitted essentially a list of every location in the state, designated whether or not it's served, unserved, or underserved. Any unserved or underserved locations will then be eligible for BEAD, and we intend to serve every unserved and underserved location in the state. With that, it's about 900 million of our 1.1 billion total allocation. So at the moment, we are curing our BEAD list of locations with the NTIA. Once that sort of is resolved, once we kind of can agree on the locations and the map, excuse me, that will allow us to draw our own project areas, which is our intent. It's laid out in our initial proposal, volume 2. But essentially what we'll do is we will draw specific project areas. Providers will bid on those project areas. A successful bid represents an obligation to serve every location within that area. And then the winning bids will go out, they'll serve those, and we'll get it rolling. Like I said, I think we're anticipating, depending on how quickly we can resolve all this with the NTIA and then get our project areas drawn and finalized. I think we're anticipating opening applications for BEAD in summer or early fall. Like I said, that's tentative. We're going to do our best with that, but that is where we're at the moment, waiting on, like I said, the curing process with the NTIA for the specific locations for the map.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Jacob, this is David Palmer, Polk County, Florida. On that front, on the overall map, there is a number of, and if I saw the last one correctly, about 53,000 locations within Florida that fall within that BEAD challenge that was sustained and being reviewed or being accepted. There are still a number of locations, and I know that some of them are DSL, some of them are that are planned on. Is there going to be a layered map that will show how all of the unserved or underserved as of today that fall into these other categories that do not fall into that will be addressed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? The question was ones
Sure.
that don't fall into unserved and underserved?
Well, we have a significant number of unserved or underserved here in Polk County, but a significant portion of those are already being, quote unquote, addressed through the refresh of the DSL. So those were removed. Then there's a number of those that are also still not served and are still showing underserved, but are supposed to be covered under such things as RDOF. So they were removed. So by the time we ended up with that process, we ended up with a volume of, the initial challenge was around, I'm going to throw out a number, 50,000. And when we were all said and done, what was accepted was 838. But we want to make sure that everything is getting covered at some point, but I don't have a clear vision into what do those others look like, and is there a commitment? Because I know that you said every location in the service area, and we're not seeing that as of today. Is there a map that is going to show how all of those are going to be addressed?
Yes. So we have our transparency app live right now. Aaron or Josh or someone, if you could post a link to that so people can see the results of the challenge process. As far as RDOF, to your point, we're working on working that into the contract so that there's a way for people who have been awarded under the RDOF program to, in order to be eligible for BEAD, to sort of have made progress on their RDOF areas so that they're not sitting on it. Obviously, the RDOF program is a lot longer. And so there's been concern. A big part of our conversations going back to the beginning of the office has been figuring out a way to deal with RDOF, because obviously there are a bunch of defaults. So that's in our initial proposal, is asking providers to speak to their RDOF areas, and then attach, essentially having begun construction on their RDOF areas to winning a BEAD award. So we're trying to tie those two things together to make sure that RDOF areas are not defaulted on, and then those areas that are unserved now but are subject to an existing enforceable commitment are then not left out in the final count, essentially.
Thank you.
And just to jump in, this is Leo. Again, as Jacob mentioned, our commitment is to serve every location that will not or show that it's currently unserved or underserved through the dollars that we have committed to our infrastructure aspect for the BEAD program. So Peter and all, I know this is something that's, been obviously a thorn on everyone's side, and even Paul can speak to it. This is what keeps us up at night, is the inability or to really know where those folks that have been awarded RDOF funding to, hold firm on their commitment, right? Which is why we've put that as part of our scoring rubric. If you have not made any progress in your RDOF awards, you will lose points in your application. In essence, giving them the inability to potentially win an area. And it's quite a bit of funding, so they don't necessarily, want to be on the bad side of that. So I think, us adding that little tidbit to our volume 1 is going to help kind of drive those folks that have been awarded RDOF dollars to commit and build out in advance of them applying for our BEAD, program. And I did see that Josh did add a link, that may have been also Aaron, regarding the BEAD challenge process and the transparency app. So Josh, if there's anything you want to add to kind of the location and where we're at with the NTIA, please feel free to jump in.
All right. Well, if Josh doesn't have anything else to add, I think we can move forward. We've got some hands and I see some questions in the chat. Joe, please feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Jacob, thank you. I have 2 questions. One around the class of RDOF. It's one thing to hold RDOF recipients' feet to the fire, which I applaud. It's another thing to consider that where RDOF enforceable build-out commitments have been made, that may make the locations considered covered, or served, and not unserved. And it could be the case that some of those RDOF recipients will not be built out until 28, 29, even 30 as part of the 10 years. So how my question is, how has Commerce addressed RDOF enforceable build-out commitments in terms of defining them as unserved or underserved? And then I have a second question after you answer that.
Sure. So the thought is, in terms of the specific way that we write it into the application or contract with an RDOF provider, would be to show evidence of having begun the project in some way. Not necessarily having finished it, but if we can show that they're at least having made some sort of initial progress on it after the bid, then the idea is that there wouldn't be too long of a wait in between the beginning and the end. So that's sort of our logic there, is showing having begun something, and then, like I said, that should hopefully get the ball rolling and make some progress, so that, like you said, they're not waiting 5-10 years to get service.
Thank you. And my second question is around allocation of the BEAD monies. Of the 1.1 million, I think you referenced about 900 million is your estimate for satisfying 100% coverage on all unserved and underserved locations. The way I read the BEAD NOFO, the third tier is then to support community anchors. Let's assume the 900,000 comes out to be an accurate estimate. Could be higher, could be lower, as we know. But whatever the residual amount is, will that be yet another phase of application sometime late in 25 or early 26? Any guidance you can give us there? And I understand it's all informal right now.
Yes, sir. So at the moment, the plan is, I think, to utilize funding that would be left over towards more digital literacy and cybersecurity type initiatives as opposed to CAIs. I think our thought is CAIs are largely going to be included in the project areas, and we are hoping that service providers will serve a CAI that's in a neighborhood. Like if you have several apartment complexes or whatever that are unserved, and then you have a CAI, a library in between them, and that's unserved, right? That they wouldn't intentionally skip that CAI. So we do not intend to have a third round of funding specifically for CAIs. And like I said, I think we have 110 million allocated at the moment for workforce, 30 million for cybersecurity and digital literacy. And then afterwards, funds that are left over, like you said, it's tentative and we haven't, it all depends on the way that it shakes out. But we are not prioritizing CAIs, and I don't think that we would have a CAI specific round after unserved and underserved are dealt with the
Thank you
initial
for the guidance.
900-ish million. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the guidance.
Peter, I believe you're next in line.
Hey, Jacob, you guys are doing a great job. It's very encouraging to see the momentum. So on that note, we talked about BEAD, digital adoption and use grant. That's got to be right around the corner, hopefully. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's in the works. We are working on finalizing all of this stuff with our leadership. But yes, to your point, we are making progress on that.
Okay, great. Oops, I turn my hands off here. All right, and then I follow up in that vein. I have two things that we're working on that we had questions. One was we're purchasing a mobile vehicle in one of the counties and for digital enablement and take it around to the areas because we've got whole half of the county that's getting fiber under the BIP and BOP, but they don't have the like buildings and they don't have the facilities down there yet. So we've already budgeted to purchase this van bus thing that we haven't completely funded the outfitting of it yet and the staffing. Is that something like that where we purchase the vehicle but then need help with the digital pieces and the people? Would that be fundable under the adoption and use?
So I think Paul is on and can speak more specifically to it. I don't believe we can fund the purchase of a vehicle, but I think the other programmatic elements we probably could fund, like you said, staffing and then devices. I think we need to see more specific information about the way that it's outfitted and what you're referring to. But
Mhm.
that's generally my understanding is that we can't fund a vehicle, but we could fund some sort of external parts of it. Paul, if you're on the call and want to jump in.
Yeah, thanks,
And we,
Jacob. Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So, yeah, we definitely won't be able to buy the vehicle. And I caution people to use the funds that they receive as salaries to hire people, because you may have an ongoing employee with a non-recurring funding source. So that puts everybody at odds towards the end. When the funding runs out, what do? You fire everybody or what? So not that it can't be done, but it would be time limited if you wanted to have somebody man those vehicles or man a community anchor institution or whatever. I would make sure that you make it quite clear that it's time limited so that you don't have somebody get hired expecting to have a long-term job and have only one for a year or two or three for however long you're able to get your award for.
that makes sense. Yeah, we're going to fund a couple of bodies, but it basically became how much time the vehicle could be in motion, and we thought we needed one more body, one more staffer. So we'll fine tune that and give you a preview. And then in that same vein, that same area, the fiber is coming, and we've seen it actually from the BIP and BOP. It's already being built. Everybody's very excited. And we talked about possibly putting a modular building that we would call the Digital Learning Center in that area when the fiber first gets there, because don't have funding yet to do the library or anything in that area of the county. Would like about a $200,000 or $250,000 modular building be something that could be included? I know you don't want us to build buildings and big things like that, but Thoughts on that? A modular type building to get to an area that's getting the fiber and the broadband for the first time?
So again, these are questions that we're having internally as well.
Mhm.
There are very few parameters associated with these funds as long as they, and for the capacity grant anyhow, as long as they help to implement our adoption and use plan. And obviously getting more access to broadband is one of our priorities. So something we can entertain. It's not something that we've had internal discussions, but not something we made a decision on yet as to whether we want to get into the construction and rehab with these funds that we have, because these funds are not, I mean, it's $70 million all told. So that's 70 million over 5 years. It's not going to be an awful lot to build an awful lot of locations, things of that nature. So if you got a specific project that you want to do, when you want to
Mhm.
give us some insight, send that to Jacob or Aaron, and we'll be happy to take a look at it. Not to say that it would be approved specifically for you,
Yep.
but maybe a project
Right.
that we would say is eligible.
Yeah, and personally, Paul, I don't think it's a good use for buildings myself, given the need. But the one group is because the area is barren, they basically want to stick a digital stake in the ground. So we'll build that out for you. And I just want to lastly mention on February 5th, Mr. Sostrom is going to be joining us in Miami-Dade, and we're going to do a digital enablement workshop, and there'll be 40 or 50 people there, and we're going to have an open workshop in the afternoon. So if anybody's interested in learning more, or frankly, like people like Beatrice, who are the experts, if you want to drop in and share your knowledge and talk with some of the other experts that'll be there, we'd love having you. The link is somewhere in this chat. I'll put another one, but looking forward. And thank you, Jacob, for joining us in Miami-Dade.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Happy to be there.
No, we're excited. Take care.
Thank you. All right, David, forgive me. I'm going to answer Kyle's question in the chat real quick before we move on. He asked, best way for LTPTs to support us if we're going to be drawing our own BEAD project areas. So we want to make sure that LTPTs can still give us the sort of accurate situation on the ground, that we haven't missed anything. I know David has sort of spoke to that in his last comment about making sure that our maps and challenge process and all that is accurate and our data is as good as possible. So we definitely want to make sure that we get your feedback on all elements of our process. Once we release, so we have the transparency app out now. We're definitely looking for your feedback on that, and we want to get feedback on the map that we eventually release, our list of locations, and then the project areas also. So there will be a lot of, I think, opportunities for feedback in that way. And then we definitely are looking for a lot of local feedback and connections with respect to the digital literacy stuff, the digital capacity, non-deployment, and workforce situations. We know that every situation is different. Every, sort of situation has different institutions that interact with each other. There's a bunch of different local contexts and that we can never understand without having y'all's perspective on that. So that's I think going to be a key sort of element of the LTPTs, is making sure that we can use the funds as efficiently as possible so that we can know what's working, what already works, what could use improvement, where do you lack capacity, where do you have capacity, things like that. Just making sure that our information and data is as accurate as possible. I definitely think that's going to be key for the LTPTs moving forward. To your point, the infrastructure elements are going to sort of, I think, be shifting away with BEAD, given that we're going to be sort of putting our foot down and saying these are the project areas. But we still want to make sure that we loop in the locals as effectively as possible. So I think is sort of what we're looking at for the LTPTs moving forward. Thank you for the question. All right, David, go ahead.
Thank you, Jacob. And first, I want to start with, we really do appreciate the transparency, the openness, and the willingness to have these type of meetings ongoing, to be able to ask these kind of questions and just talk through some of these. So I don't want at all my questions to be misconstrued as being critical. I do not think that at all. I know you guys are super helpful. But I
Appreciate
did
that.
want, yeah,
Most people don't like state government, so thank you.
yeah. No, I get that. Most people don't like local government either. And that's one of the areas that we're running into a bit of a challenge here. And why I appreciated what Leo had shared and what you shared, but there was a big distinction. Leo, you had stated every location in a service area. And then when the question was asked about the CAIs, or community anchor / critical infrastructure, those are kind of separate and distinct. And what we're running into here, and I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, I'm going to use them as an example. Charter Spectrum. We've got BIP and BOP that's out there. Spectrum is the residential group, and they are doing their thing and getting a plot, but they are skipping intentionally critical infrastructure and community anchors. And then they're coming back and charging significantly for build out for those. And so when we pose these questions, and we're going to, and Jacob, I think you're joining us tomorrow, we're looking forward to that, to the groups, what we're getting is, oh no, that's charter and they're the business side. So we aren't following that. That's the residential side. And so that's why I'm asking, are we truly talking about in this next round, all locations, which is my plan, and every location in a service area to be addressed? Or are we still segregating and separating out CAIs, critical infrastructure, and community anchors?
So
I can take that, Jacob.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, so our intent is to have every location served in a specific project area. And we'll know what community anchor institutions are there, as well as any other kind of business or industrial areas or things of that nature that don't already have access to the internet. So we'll make allowances for that, for additional costs associated with it. And we'll work with the ISPs. We have ample time to negotiate with them between our initial selection process and the final approval by NTIA, to have discussions with the providers to make sure that they've provided ample budget to meet those locations. And if they want to partner, if they have a business side and a commercial and a residential side, we're quite happy having them partner together. And I don't care which one ends up with the money, but they can share the money between the two, so that if they want to maintain a separate business entity and a separate residential entity, that's fine, as long as they work together and the same money goes to both of them. I don't really have a problem with that. But our goal is to make sure that every location that is not already considered served by NTIA to have access to 100 service in those particular project areas. So we'll know what's in those areas. We're also going to, pre-plan for any federal permitting or costs associated with federal permitting. The federal government won't let you build through a forest without charging you an arm and a leg per foot. So we want to make sure that everybody knows what those locations are in advance, so that they can build that into their application as well, and don't come back later on and say, well, I didn't realize it was going to cost me $1,000 a year to go through this location or across this brook or around that bridge or whatever. So we're trying to give as much insight as we possibly can and be proactive in these kinds of things. And just to go back to one of the questions that y'all had earlier with the RDOF areas, this has been the biggest thing that keeps me awake at night. Of the 9 providers in the state that have RDOF locations, 6 have already started construction. And we've been bugging the rest of them to continue to move forward with that. We intentionally provided some service areas under our Broadband Opportunity and Capital Projects Funds programs to coincide with the RDOF areas that already existed, so that it would jumpstart them to, when they're building their broadband opportunity, their capital projects, let's just continue and build those RDOF areas as well. So there's been some incentive there. Once you got the crew out there and you're receiving money, for mobilization and things of that nature, it's intuitive for them to save money by going ahead and building those RDOF areas out. Lacking that, we have set aside some funds to cover the RDOF areas that we don't anticipate right now that are going to be completed. And we'll have conversations with those providers in the NTIA and the FCC about allowing them to to go ahead and back out of those. I know that they tried to do this without a penalty. We'll see if we can't minimize the penalties or something to that nature. Because again, that RDOF program is going to last longer than BEAD. And if they don't get served under the BEAD program because they're considered obligated by the RDOF program, then we're still going to have the same people that needed this the most in the very beginning are not going to have any access to that service. So we are being proactive in making sure those RDOF areas get built out, or that they surrender those areas and we provide the service to them ourselves, the funding for it.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, oh, there's a new message in the chat. Oh, it's from Peter. Okay. I'm gonna go through the chat real quick and make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay, everything looks good. So now we will move on to the LTPT reports. I will ask those who are not a part of the LTPT to please step off. Thank you again for coming. You know, if you still want to see this part of the meeting, it will be posted on Florida Commons YouTube. But other than that, LTPTs, please stay on for any updates or reports that y'all would like to provide to us.
Hey, Aaron, Sam Roberts from Duval County LTPT. Just a brief update. We're in the process of finalizing our report right now. I spoke to you about that earlier, and we're going to be distributing it to a lot of our community stakeholders. We recently updated our LTPT and somehow ended up with more members than we did originally. So we've got some good outreach. People are actually speaking on our behalf to try and get the word out that we're still out here, even with all of the leadership changes that we've been experiencing here. So we're on the process of distributing that, and should be out in the next couple weeks, I believe.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Whenever that does come out, can you make sure to share that with the office by any chance?
Of course, yeah, we'll put you on the mailing
Okay.
list when we send it out.
Okay, awesome. No, I look forward to seeing that. But no, that's great news for y'all's county. Does anyone have any other updates or challenges that they would like to discuss?
Aaron, this is David Palmer, Polk County, again, an LTPT lead. First off, again, thanks. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Josh. The kind of quick update from us is we are hosting tomorrow an in-person refresh of our original project plan that we had submitted. So we're going back, looking at our overall SWOT analysis, as well as our tactical plans. And we'll be doing a refresh, and that was going to be one of my questions is, do you at the state level, would you like a copy of that once we complete our refresh after tomorrow's meeting?
Yeah, no, that would be great. I really enjoy it whenever y'all share that kind of information with us, just because it gives us an idea of what y'all are doing down there, and it can give us a better idea, you know, if Leo actually recently has been, you know, presenting a few presentations over to the Senate and House recently. So it also gives, you know, y'all's state representatives a good idea of what's going on. And, you know, they can take pride in that and show it off potentially in this coming legislative session. But no, please share that with us. But then also it's a good idea to share with us as well, because then we're able to share that with other LTPTs to help them, you know, get an idea of, you know, doing something like that as well.
Terrific. And then my final question is there a location or a way that we in Polk County can get a list of locations and dollars spent across the grant funding as part of this that's been going on for the last few years, so that we can kind of keep a tab on that? I know we've had some dollars awarded and then not spent, and so I just did not know if there was a centralized area where we can find that information, or if that can be sent to us.
We should be able to send that to y'all. I can talk to our grant managers about the projects that have been going on in Polk County specifically, to see if they're, you know, to provide, if we're allowed to provide the financial update. I'm not sure about that. If Paul's still on the call, he might be able to answer that for you. So I think we should be able to provide some type of update at least.
That'll be
Yeah,
great.
so
That'll probably get. Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just for some future information, we're working on a hub for the office that is going to identify every project that we've got under the existing programs and BEAD as well. That will give you a progress map of what's going on with every project throughout the state. We can certainly share with you what we know has been completed thus far for your county. We can say that here's the projects, what program they're associated with, what the initial budget was, and if there are milestones or funding that has been expended or met, we can provide that to you. That's fairly simple to do. But eventually that will be available to the public as well as anybody else that wants to look at it, so that you'll be able to see the progress being made, how much money spent, and what locations specifically have been provided access to.
That would be great. Thank you, Paul.
You're more than welcome.
Okay. Does anyone have any more updates that they would like to provide or anything else they would like to talk about? Okay. So our next meeting will be February 20th. I'm trying to think of anything else before we go. Within that time period, I'm hoping we can provide just more updates and information to y'all. But thank you again for coming, and we will see y'all in February.